Alright guys, what's up? Welcome back to another day here at Whitley Auto Works. I'm sitting here with Josh from another YouTube channel, Midnight Auto Repair, and also a fellow Napa employee. As you know, I told you guys I work at a Napa automotive store that does paint, and I got Josh too. He actually does too, but he does a little bit of some other stuff, so I'm going to kind of let him tell you what he does real quick and a little bit about his channel, and then we'll get into today's video. Rustoleum paint jobs versus automotive paint jobs. A debate, well, a realistic talk about the differences, the good and bad, and just overall thoughts and opinions. So, go ahead, Josh.
Hey guys, so this is Josh from Midnight Auto Repair. And I gotta thank John for welcoming me on to Whitley Auto Works because, well, his channel's pretty fantastic. So, you know, if you like what he's doing, throw a like and a comment down in his little comment section. Let him know how he's doing with us here. But most of you guys know that I live my channel doing revivals. So I kind of like to test my Technic shot on a regular basis. I work on classic cars, but for 40 plus hours a week, I actually work for Napa, and what I do is I'm the guy that comes to the shops and usually helps diagnose problems. So kind of what we're dealing with here is right up my alley. And Rustoleum's a different kind of medium as far as I'm concerned. So it is a paint, but remember, you're starting with something that's really, really slow to dry on its own. So whenever you're trying to clear coat something like that, you run into an issue where it's so slow that what you put on top of it sometimes can cause an issue. So, you know, like the blue Camaro is a perfect example.
Yeah, as you guys know, I painted my dad's Camaro here recently, and we had a little bit of an issue. I used the U-Pole clear coat. It's a European style clear coat. It's not urethane based clear coat, and it's the 2882. And I had some issues with it over top of the actual Rustoleum. I didn't put hardener in the Rustoleum, so that was number one. And then two, the clear, I guess, was drying on top of the Rustoleum, and the Rustoleum didn't have enough time to really air out, I guess. So it was sealing onto itself. So,
well, the other problem you could be running into with that too is, now Rustoleum, especially if you're reducing it with like acetone or lacquer thinner, those are two really hot solvents that you're dealing with in Rustoleum, which naturally is slow to cure on its own. Mm-hmm. Now, when you have those two in there and you end up with a slow curing medium, when you go to put something over it, like say you have like a high solids clear, like this Axo Glamour clear here, that is a high solids clear, and trying to get something that's really slow to dry on its own to breathe through a high solids medium above it could be causing an issue where you're not getting enough air to it to allow the solvents to flash off properly, which most times you would get solvent pop. But then you also end up with a situation where you're dealing with lacquer thinner and you're dealing with acetone, which are usually two really strong solvents. Now you add that into laying a clear over, you could actually have those solvents still trying to keep the clear soft itself. It's preventing it from catalyzing.
right.
That's why we've kind of, you've let me know that like the Nason, the 296 clear, the Speedo Coat clear, you know, just stuff that's a lower solids and a faster curing clear seems to be the ticket that you've come across so far.
Yeah, because I mean, I've even used some of the oil-based lacquer clears, like the Tractor Supply clear, the Magic brand clear, and it has a really slow dry time as well. And if you don't add the hardener agent, they make a little hardener can you can add into the Rustoleum, and I've been adding into that clear and pretty much turning the 1K into a 2K. But the clear itself, it dries, but then it starts to gum up, it starts to shrink. And I've had a lot of that reaction too with, say, the high-tech stuff, the regular acrylic enamel. When I put that over top of the Rustoleum, it does kind of like the Speedo Coat. It dries good, but I get quite a bit of shrinkage. But I guess what I'm kind of curious about also is the Speedo Coat is a urethane-based clear. And I seem to have really good results, as I showed you with the fender, like after about 6 to 8 hours. I mean, it's pretty good and solid, just like any other automotive stuff. So, but I never had any issues with the urethane shrinking over top of the Rustoleum.
Urethane, it really depends what you're doing, because the way that it cures, especially if you have it on something where it can move with it underneath, it will accept it as long as it's within that capability of where when it starts to cure, obviously it starts to pull in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's starting to actually set up.
Yeah.
The Rustoleum below it, still soft enough that it can float. It's kind of like old school acrylic enamel. Like if you were to use like the old Fast Dry or like Delphi, or if you guys even remember Centauri. Centauri too was one of those ones where initially you didn't need a catalyzer to go in that, so you could spray it on there and it would air cure. Now, the nice thing about that is it makes it really simple to do in a shop or in your garage or somewhere where it's not the perfect environment, but it's good enough. The only problem you run into is you have nothing to really lock that in to make it solid. So let's say, for instance, you figure out you're doing like a single stage silver in that.
Right.
And it gets a little zebra stripey. You go back through, you realize, oh God, 20, 30 minutes later, it's not right, but it's already started to dry. Mm-hmm. So you've got that skin on top. You go back through, whip up another batch to try to lay over it. Next thing you know, the whole thing looks like your kneecap when you stretch your leg out all the way. You know, it's just wrinkled in.
Yeah, I've had that happen.
It's the solvent trying to reactivate the top of it, and whenever it does that, you end up with that skin just pulls in.
Right, right.
So you end up with a surface that just doesn't want anything else on top of it. That's why whenever you're done, you're done.
Yeah, yeah.
And then something like that, you wait usually at least a week before you go to try to put something else above it, or otherwise you'll end up with that reaction.
Well, I know you were talking about the other day when we were first discussing this, you had said something about how I've been using acetone to thin the Rustoleum. You thought it might be even a good idea to possibly try a reducer in it to... What was the whole deal with that?
So the idea with automotive reducers is not only do they chemically help the automotive base coat it goes in, but they have a really consistent flash off rate. Mm-hmm. Whereas like a lacquer thinner and acetone would be considered a really fast reducer.
Right.
You know, if you're using the old school acrylic primer, a lot of guys just cut that with thinner instead of cutting it with like a reducer. A reducer will allow that to flash off at a very consistent rate. Like say it's a really, really hot day or something. You could use like a mid-temp or even a slower reducer. And the thing is you won't end up with that skin that cures on the top really quickly, and then below it, it still stays soft.
Yeah.
You'll end up with something that tries to evenly dry itself through before you're going to put the next layer on.
Right. So, I know back in the day, originally, everything pretty much was oil-based. I know when you're talking about how it was a real popular one that you said everybody wanted to use back in the day. You were telling me about, or I can't remember the name.
So, Centauri was the original acrylic.
Right.
Now, before that, in automotive, you had lacquer, and then you had alkyd enamel. And those were the two initial top coats that you would use. And they were single stage. Yeah. Just like old lacquer, you know, it was one of those things where if you shot a fender and you didn't like the way it looked, you'd spray lacquer thinner on it and drain it right off. Right. Then you got to alkyd enamel, which would have a catalyst to it. And then you got to acrylic enamel, which would be like Centauri, or Nason has one called Full Curl. And acrylic enamel was great for the time it came out. But nowadays you're ending up with, like, urethane would be the modern equivalent of that. Just because urethane is so much more durable, holds up to the UV better, and it catalyzes, and when it catalyzes, it has a super fine, super nice shine to it. Right. Now, Rustoleum, on the other hand, has always been used more on the bottom side of the car than the top. The Rustoleum is kind of a new thing. I mean, guys have been doing it for years, obviously. But to do it, and do it where you're not just even laying Rustoleum down, but you're doing like pearls and setting everything in clear, that is kind of a newer occurrence to this kind of thing.
Yeah, because is it trim clad? Isn't that oil based, or it's an automotive?
You're thinking like trim black stuff like that.
Or trim clad paint, or the Imron, that type of stuff. Like you were talking about.
Oh, the tough coat.
Yeah, like it comes in like safety blue and like some of the same colors that Rustoleum does.
Right, and very very similar product, except if I remember right, Rustoleum uses some form of like a fish oil. If I want to say, my research has done me well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an unusual medium, but it's also meant to prevent rust from. It's kind of like an encapsulator.
Now, is that an acrylic enamel, the Imron stuff?
Yeah, that's an acrylic, yes.
Okay, so
it's still meant for like an automotive application or a heavy truck or a trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Rustoleum, I mean, most guys, like if you put Rustoleum on a car and you don't catalyze it, and especially in the North Carolina sun down here, you know what a black car looks like after about 2 years.
Oh yeah, I know what it looks like after about 6 months of spraying some of this in gloss black on a car. It looks like satin.
Right.
Yeah.
So you end up with something that it's not meant for the UV.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why most people have used it as like a frame paint, or like if you're at home or something, you paint a railing, because railing, what's it painting that every couple of years?
Well, what's your opinion on, say, why a lot of automotive YouTubers just have so much hate for trying to do stuff like I've been doing with putting automotive grade clear over Rustoleum, simple oil base?
So this is an interesting situation we run into, because you're trying to use a medium that most people aren't familiar with in the style that you're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, we've all passed at like Lowe's or Home Depot the gallon of black Rustoleum. What is it, like $40 now?
Yeah, it used to be $28, man. Now it's $48.99. I'm just like, man, because I did a video about 10 months ago, and I was looking back at that video the other day, and the gallon of Rustoleum was $30, and I was showing everybody a quart of the fast dry, the automotive pretty much equivalent to Rustoleum to a certain extent.
Right, and that's probably $60-65.
It was, now it's over $100 for a quart.
Right.
So now it's $400 for that. And then you just look at the way the prices have changed and all that. So no wonder people like to take their chance on some Rustoleum and a little bit of automotive clear, you know?
Right, I mean, for that, especially like some of these kits, like the Speedo Coat and stuff like that, you can get on Amazon or eBay really cheap. We're talking, you're under $100 in for the kit.
Yeah, well, the kits now, I will say, those kits have kind of gone up a little bit. I've seen them anywhere, like the pre-made eBay paint kits and stuff. Most of them are about $130 to $170, but still, that puts it in the range of buying this with a gallon of acetone and clear coat. But I know a lot of those kits are single stage kits. They come with the reducer and the hardener, like just enough to do a gallon of it, and they, you know, obviously you get the metallic colors and stuff like that, which is a good advantage for, you know, over the Rustoleum, unless you start grabbing metallic spray cans and painting your whole car with a spray can and then going into clear coating it. But so those kits are a good alternative, you know.
They are, but like even like, what was that, the old Nason, the 258, the old silver label clear, that used to be one of those clears that you could get the gallon of clear, the quart of hardener for, if I remember right, it was like $90. It was just dummy cheap.
Yeah.
But it was one of those clears that it was shine for the sake of being shine.
Mm-hmm.
There was no UV resistance to it. It laid out super beautiful because it was a low solids clear. Whenever you sprayed that on, it's like spraying on water, you know. It was real thin. It'd lay out nice. Just don't put it on too heavy and it won't run.
Right.
But the problem you run into with clears like that and super low end clears is the lack of UV resistance. So when you put it on top of something, even if you're doing an automotive base coat, you can run into a situation where it looks great for 6 months, a year. Like I say, you start getting into like Florida, you go like California, places where the sun is a very, very harsh thing.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Especially even here.
Dude, the Tractor Supply Clear, I used to use that over Rustoleum paint jobs. If some of you guys go back and have stayed with me for about 5 years of this channel, you'll see me back when I've done some of my other Pearl paint jobs, use the Tractor Supply Clear. And a lot of times I would use that to put on a car, and you know, I wouldn't have the car for more than about 6 to 8 months. But I had a buddy, and we did it on his car, and his car just lived out in the sun. And that clear, man, after about 8 months, it just went to nothing, especially on the top. So I had to move away from it. And if you guys are watching some of my old videos, a little public service announcement: do not use the Tractor Supply clear over top of Rustoleum and expect long-term results. I mean, if you're going to garage keep the car, maybe, but guys, that clear is like $100, and so is this, and this is urethane clear. If you're going to use clear over Rustoleum, definitely use something like that, urethane, because that regular lacquer, like enamel clear, is just no. It's a no-go.
Well, different horses for different courses. It was meant to, you know, like if you got an old farmall or something, you just
tractor.
Yeah, you just refinished, and you know, say it's something you take to tractor shows. Other than that, it lives in the corner of the barn 6 months of the year.
Yeah.
That clear is perfectly fine because it's not going to see the UV. It's not going to see the abuse that tractor day in, day out harvesting a field is going to see.
Yeah.
And even then, most times they're just doing it to keep the thing from rusting. So they can personally care less.
And that clear is yellow. Like when you open that can, it's a daggone egg, boy.
Oh yeah. So I mean, clear coat is one of those things where you don't have to get as crazy as something like this that's $500-600 a gallon clear, but you know, you do get what you pay for, because if you do get something that's just a little better, you're also looking at something that has more UV resistance to it, which means that its longevity will hold up. I'm assuming that, you know, most of the folks who are doing Rustoleum paint jobs, they still want the same things out of it that, you know, the guys who are doing automotive paint jobs.
They want it to last, yeah.
Right. So I mean, you're using a different medium for a base coat, effectively, is what it is.
Yeah.
Because the same thing, you'll get guys who will take like full krill or full thane or something like that, and they'll top coat it. But you still have to stay within that window when you're top coating it, or wait till it's completely completely set up, and then go through and take like a gray Scotch-Brite or something, go over, give it a little bit of the surface, and then clear it that way.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do it, wet on wet's always the best way to go, because chemically the two bond.
Yeah.
And that's honestly the biggest thing you want when you're doing clear. Is, and we've all driven around and we've seen cars where you can see the clear coat peeling off, and next thing you know, they look really ugly. Especially like old GMs and old Chryslers used to be real good for that, where you can always tell when they've gone interstate speeds at rain, because you'd start seeing the clear coat peeling off, and you just see the base coat underneath it.
Yeah.
That's because you have poor adhesion.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you start with some wet on wet. You know,
right.
Something within the recoat window, going from your base coat to your clear. Now, the weird part about Rustoleum is it takes so long for Rustoleum to dry normally.
I know.
That's usually the hardest part, is because you don't know when your recoat window actually is.
Yeah.
You know, because you can sit there, you can kind of take your finger and fingerprint it in an inconspicuous area. 3 hours, 4 hours after you put it on there.
Yeah.
It's still really soft.
And that's probably why the most common question I am asked by most of you guys is, how long do I wait before I put the clear on? And I tell you guys pretty much like I do all my automotive stuff. It gets tacky to touch, but you're not pulling paint off on your finger. After about 45 minutes to an hour, it is a little bit wet. So a lot of people will complain that's wet on wet. But that's the time that I've always put it on there. And that's the way I've done it. I've not had any issues that way. And I mean, that's just what it is. A lot of people are like, should I wait, throw the hardener in it, let it dry, go back, sand it? I said, yeah, if that's the way you're comfortable, guys, do it the way you're comfortable doing it. Obviously, if you go back and do that, wet sand everything back down, and then clear coat it, that's the best way to make sure you're not going to have any reactions or weird issues. The way I've done it is just the way I've done it. You can do it my way. You can do it that way. You know, to each their own. You know, there's really no wrong way per se to do it between the two. Now, obviously, you just don't want to do it too soon. Because if you do it too soon, then, yeah, you can have all sorts of issues.
And now, a little trick that you guys can use out there is, you know, you can go to like a corner body shop or something. They'll probably have a wrecked up fender. If you've got something you want to try, you know, in the automotive paint world, we have these little metal cards. They're spray out cards. And what it is you do what you're going to do on the vehicle on that card, and for automotive purposes, normally it's for color match.
Yeah, and I always tell everybody, do a spray out first.
Because the big thing is if you're going to have an issue, especially when you go to lay clear on, mixing up 2 or 3 ounces of clear just to go over that little card, it's not going to hurt you in the long run for what you're doing. But what it'll do is it'll tell you a lot about what's going to happen when you put that automotive clear on your Rustoleum on the car. If you get to the point where you do your spray out and it's tacky and you're feeling good about it, and you go spray your clear on it and it wrinkles up, you've got this little card. That's all the damage you have done to it.
And you ain't doing it on the whole car.
You ain't doing it on the whole car. And it allows you to say, hey, maybe I waited too long on the Rustoleum before I laid clear on there. Cut it up 15, 20 minutes before you would have done that the first time, and see if you get the same result.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the big thing is trying to figure out which clears go with this the best. We've kind of figured out that urethane clears and usually faster clears tend to set up fast enough that you don't get that reaction, especially if you're using like acetone to thin that out.
Yeah.
It doesn't interfere chemically with whatever's going on there.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, when it comes to automotive clears, I would say that this is your guide right here, because he's really gone through a lot of effort that I would say some haven't gone through, and they show you the end result without actually showing you kind of the misery in the middle.
Yeah, or it's just explaining to you why certain things are happening the way they're happening. And I've even had reactions before with the Speedo Coat Clear when I've tried to stack 2 different colors of Rustoleum on top of each other. I know you guys seen some of my fender spray outs where I try to half and half, and sometimes at the midpoint it will actually start reacting, and the clear will actually get eaten up by the Rustoleum. And I think that's because I'm stacking 2 different colors with 2 different dry times, and then you throw that urethane clear on it, and it's not kosher at all. It just don't work together.
Right.
But then you see something like this where I've shot it over primer of all things, and it did fine. It sealed right up. I didn't have no eat-through points, and that's with primer.
Right. But that's a consistent medium underneath. Like, say you're doing 2 halves of a fender, and you start the first half with a gallon of Rustoleum, and the second half you do with the black can.
Right.
You've got 2 different reducers here too, because spray can reducers tend to be really fast, and the paint that comes out tends to be on the thinner side compared to what you're dealing with. So you're ending up with 2 entirely different dry times. Even though you may have the same product in the can, they're coming out in 2 different ways.
And I have a lot of questions about that too. So whenever I'm doing spray can stuff and people ask me about it, I say after about 20 minutes, it's go time for the clear with the spray can stuff. But when you're doing this right here, it takes a lot longer for it to set up, at least enough to where it's not pulling paint off on your finger.
Right, like in the spray can, they don't use lacquer thinner, they don't use acetone. They will actually use a reducer, whether it's an automotive reducer or it's like a household reducer. Because they have those, now with the invention of the power paint guns that you can get.
Yeah. Like the Wagner and stuff like that.
Yeah, like Wagner's. You still will have to reduce that down a little bit to get it to set properly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're spraying out really, really thick sludge, essentially.
Yeah.
And it doesn't want to lay out, so you might get texture if it dries too quickly.
Mm.
So whether it's a home-based reducer, like you can get it like Lowe's or Home Depot, or an automotive reducer, their qualities is they're not as hot of a solvent. They're designed to thin out the medium that's in and dry super consistently. Now, obviously getting into automotive stuff, the reducer also will usually carry a component that goes with the base coat itself.
Yeah.
To help with UV resistance and stuff like that. But, I mean, that's staying within the automotive category where I live.
Yeah, and that's probably where most people that I have the arguments with get tripped up, because like you're saying with the UV being more into the automotive grade stuff and maybe this not having the greatest UV protection, and then I get in arguments with them where they're sitting there saying, well, you can't clear coat over that because it ain't got no UV protection. And then I'm trying to explain, well, yeah, you're right, but when I apply the urethane clear coat over top, there's my UV protection.
Right. Now, with Rustoleum, because I've painted equipment trailers with Rustoleum before, favorite medium of mine to do something like that because it's cheap and easy. That's why we're here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But what I've always done is I've taken Rustoleum and I've always gone and gotten the pint of Farm and Implement, Krylon Farm and Implement hardener.
Yeah.
To go with their acrylic enamel, and I'll throw in the Rustoleum.
Yeah.
Now, does it make it dry any faster? Not really, but when it does set up, it sets up so much harder.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, obviously if you're in for a penny, in for a pound on this one, I mean, obviously the goal is to try to do it as cheap as you can and still get the same end result in the long run.
Right.
And there's a tipping point on that. You can go too cheap and you can end up with something that looks good for a few months, 6 months, 8 months, a year, depending on where you're at. And then it falls apart.
Yeah.
And then you could end up with something where you're trying to do Rustoleum, but you end up getting an expensive hardener, or you get a really expensive clear or something. You actually negate out all what you're trying to do.
Yeah, the cost benefits and everything, because then you're stuck doing it again.
Right, because I mean, like, for this safety blue and Rustoleum, if you were to do that in like an automotive base coat or even an automotive single stage,
yeah,
you know, you're probably looking at $250, $300 gallon clear, or
right.
not clear, but base,
yeah,
versus, you know, your
$50,
right,
yeah.
So
it's $130 to $150 total and you throw a pearl over top, you know.
Right, and not only that, it's the same thing. Comes down to anything, you know, when it comes to laying on paint. It's about the cleanliness and kind of how where you're doing it. If you're doing it in, you know, a horse barn with one bulb swinging in the air, you know, and the horse is kicking up dirt, your paint job's probably going to reflect where you did it. Or if you go through and you just Scotch-Brite it and don't wipe it down with like lacquer thinner or even a reducer.
Grease remover, Prepol, something to clean it up. And then, you know, the humidity.
Right. Humidity is a big thing with paint too. Now there are certain ones like Pour 15.
Yeah.
Pour 15 actually likes humidity to cure, and it will cure harder in a very humid setting.
Right.
Now, same thing goes with that goes with the Rustoleum. If you put it out in the sunlight on its own, it's going to go from black to gray in 6 to 8 months.
Right.
Without some form of top coat or some form of protection. And that's also another product that if you're going to put paint on top of it, or in this case, like if you want to do a clear, you would do it while it's still tacky.
Right.
You know, you don't want it to be completely hard, because when it cures, it'll cure so hard that whatever's on top of it will lay on top, but it won't bond to it.
And that's why you get the delamination that everybody's so worried about. You waited too long to apply that clear coat. You're out of your window of it actually being able to somewhat be wet on wet and bond.
Right, like I'll get people that'll say, hey, you know, I'm going to paint this thing tonight, I'll clear it tomorrow. I mean, it'll look fine when they first put the clear on, but the thing is 6 months, 8 months, a year down the road, it's starting to peel off because it's just laying on top of there. There's no adhesion.
Mm-hmm. And you might could do that with some automotive base coats probably, because you probably have a little bit longer window with maybe not so much with the Rustoleum. I think the Rustoleum might be a little less forgiving.
I think the Rustoleum's a little less forgiving just because of the way it cures.
Right.
You know, you can develop that skin on top where it's got the temperature, it's got the oxygen, it's got everything working in its favor, but the rest of the mill thickness below it is still quite soft.
Yeah.
So when you go to put something on top of it, it's reacting with that skin.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I think that's where you're running into an issue, especially you guys at home, where if you go to spray clear or something above the Rustoleum after it's out of its recoat window, and then it shrinks up and, you know, I say, looks
Game
like,
over, man.
Yeah, it looks like wrinkled skin, and next thing you know, you're sitting
stripping
there.
the car down again.
You're using all kinds of words you didn't know exist to try to get that
out
thing
there with a
cleaned up.
daggone scraper or something or air hose hitting it, you know. Oh, man.
So, with automotive base and even with the Rustoleum medium, I would say your biggest friend, and this is what I tell all the shops, a spray out will save you so much in the long run, because what's going to work on that card, or if, like I say, you go to your little corner body shop,
grab a fender.
Grab a fender. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's probably going to look like somebody had a couple wobble pops on the front of it,
Hey.
but there's going to be a section of it you can use to do the exact thing that you're going to do on the rest of the vehicle on that fender. And whatever's going to happen on that is going to happen on your paint job.
Yeah.
So if it's going to react there, you get time to fix it or figure out what's going on in a much smaller, cost-effective setting. Instead of doing the whole car, and next thing you know, the whole thing's gone belly up, and you're now trying to explain to probably a very unhappy spouse of why the car's tied up for another few days. You know,
not to mention just the time of work, sanding everything back down, trying to take it off, and then you're like, it's no worse feeling than sitting there trying something like this, having a bad reaction, and then like, all right, I'm already there, I gotta do it again, but what did I do wrong? Do a spray out, guys. I mean, you watch some automotive YouTuber guys, do your research, look at some forums, talk to some people that have done it. There's a great painting with Rustoleum forum you can check out on Facebook that I'm in, so I'll try to answer questions, and you can always message me as well. And just do your research, do a spray out, regardless, do a spray out, so you can get used to it before you start taking something full scale and doing like a whole car or whatever, because trust me, you do not want to get stuck wasting all that time, the money, the material, and then the time you're done, you're in it more than if you had just used the cheapest automotive paint job.
And that's what it comes down to in the long run is it cost effective? Because doing it twice isn't nice.
No, and it's not cost effective because your time and your labor is worth something too, guys.
Right.
Which is why I try to do these spray outs. I try to answer questions and try to help you because I've been there and I don't want you guys to make the same mistakes I have. So, even if I got to go through all the automotive guys calling me a jackleg or whatever else, I'm seriously trying to help people. That's why I'm sitting down with Josh today and just talking about it. He knows a lot more about the automotive side than I do.
Right.
And I'm not on a high horse with all this stuff. I don't claim to know everything. I just claim to know enough to get by. I've been successful doing it in certain ways, so I'm trying to help you guys and somewhat bridge the gap between the guy that's doing it for the first time, the do-it-yourself guy, and the guy that actually knows from the automotive industry a little bit more of the chemical compositions, so you can kind of explain why this is happening, why it's working, why it's not working. So that's why I brought Josh in today, just to have two like minds to go back and forth and truly debate whether or not automotive paint jobs and Rustoleum paint jobs can intertwine and intermingle and actually save you guys some money. That's kind of what this whole episode today has been about.
Because honestly, on the automotive side, Rustoleum is kind of an unfamiliar medium to guys who have used automotive paint, especially if you've been painting for 10, 20, 30 years. You're used to going to either a single stage or going to a base coat.
Yeah.
Going and grabbing that can of Rustoleum and knowing what you're going to do with it, that's not where their mind goes goes first.
Yeah. Well, plus, a lot of them guys, they're running businesses. They don't have the luxury to try different things like this and have an issue or reaction. You got customers coming in, you're trying to move them in and out. It's fast paced. I mean, you really have to go with something reliable that is going to work.
And super consistent.
Yeah.
Now, dealing with Rustoleum, for me, a lot of this is the crystal ball of what could be from the automotive side. So, for me, make sure your solvents aren't too hot. Your clears really do matter. Now, there is a tipping point between getting too expensive a clear. You can end up with a high solids clear that won't let anything breathe underneath it either. And you could end up with the same situation even if you do everything underneath right.
And we both know high solids clears are typically a lot more expensive than just your regular old plain Jane urethane. And
now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of high solids clears that are starting to come out now that are within the realistic price realm.
You're right. I've seen like Eurochem and some other companies. There's even been some other ones I've seen YouTubers like Sprayway Customs use wet product and stuff like that.
Even Nason XL.
Yeah.
Nason XL 43840. That's a high solids clear.
Yeah.
It's a 2-to-1 clear.
Yeah.
That's normally where you start figuring out where your solids content is. Most 4-to-1 clears, they're very moderate solids, whereas you start getting into 2-to-1s, you're starting to get into a high solids or like a glamour clear. Right. And the problem is when that starts curing, it's high solids. It's not really breathing. It's not moving anything through
It's going to be more unforgiving, especially if you try to do something like this.
Right.
Which is why I generally don't use those. I typically try and stick with this type stuff just because I know what it's going to do. I know what I'm getting. And ultimately with this stuff, I know you don't want to, and I know you can get a better, deeper quality finish with the high solid stuff. But if nothing else, guys, you can go back after everything's cured, said and done, go back, wax, buff, cut and polish,
Right.
all that type of stuff, and get a really great finish with using this stuff.
Right, and that's kind of the thing, is that's something like you and guys in your space have been doing now for, I'd probably say a good 4 or 5 years, is figuring out the stuff that works and figuring out the stuff that doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those of you who have subscribed to this nice gentleman here, it's one of those things where you watch him because you get to see him good, bad, and ugly. You know? That's the
I got no
big thing.
shame.
Right. Well, but I mean, that's the big thing is, you know, everybody wants to look like a hero when they're doing stuff like this.
Dude,
and sometimes when they cut off the camera, when they cut on the camera, there's a lot of ugly that happens in between those two.
I'm showing all the ugly, man. I don't care.
I mean, don't get me wrong. We've all been there where it's like, I just want to turn off the camera. This went south. But then you realize that this going south for me may keep someone from...
Exactly, you know, and you bring up a good point. There's many times I wanted to just turn the camera off and just say, screw it, I'm done. And there are a couple times I have, I'm going to be honest.
Right.
But, you know, ultimately I'm staring at this camera phone I got right here. That's right, guys, I'm doing it on the phone. And, you know, I'm like, man, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to show these guys, you know.
Right, because...
It's going to happen.
Believe it or not, to me, the things that go wrong actually help people learn more than seeing everything go right off the bat.
I know, yep.
It's like watching a TikTok video where they show you they've made like some beautiful ring out of a bolt, and they make it in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You're not watching the 2.5 hours where they went through, they've screwed up on 2 bolts, and they're now on their 3rd one when they're finally going through. You know, it's just sometimes the ugly needs to be seen, but that's what we're here for, is to try to figure out where things go wrong and things go right. That way we can keep you out of the wrong category there.
Yeah. So I guess in kind of conclusion to all this, guys, is do your research. Obviously, like you said, do a spray out.
Right.
You know?
That's the biggest thing, because if you've wasted $5 in material to figure out something doesn't work, you're not in on a whole car, a whole gallon of clear, a whole gallon of Rustoleum, you know, just all the time and money you put into that first layer to have it go wrong.
Mm.
It's easier to go wrong when it's, you know, 6x6 square that either has worked right or hasn't.
Yeah.
And if it hasn't, it gives you time to be like, all right, well, you know, this didn't work. Let's go back and check Whitley Auto Works, or let's go see one of the other fine gentlemen that do stuff in this space and figure out where things went wrong.
Right. Well, Josh, man, I appreciate you coming out today, man.
Never a problem, John.
Like, man, I mean, I had a lot of fun just kind of shooting everything with you and just going through and discussing stuff. And guys, if you made it this far in the video and you like what we're doing, obviously Josh has an awesome YouTube channel too, Midnight Auto Repair. So give him a thanks for coming in today and just kind of talking with me and everything else. Go give him a follow, you know, help him out. I think he's less than 100 subscribers away from getting monetized and hitting 1,000 subscribers. So.
I'd really appreciate it, but you know, if we can get 1,500 likes on this video, I'm going to see if I can't get this guy to go play in some Rust with me.
Man, yeah, and that's another thing too. Me and him are going to start doing some more stuff. He likes to go out and junkyard hunting and find new cars to get running again. And we're talking about kind of going back and forth and doing some projects together, maybe doing some paint jobs together in the future, and do some patina paint jobs, a little bit of all kinds of things. From Automotive to Rustoleum to a little bit of all, guys. So you're not going to want to miss any of those episodes. Once again, I just want to say thanks, Josh, for coming out.
And
thank you guys for watching and checking this video out today. So if you don't mind, give us both a like, share, a comment, subscribe. I'm John from Whitley Auto Works.
And I'm Josh from Midnight Auto Repair.
And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Y'all have a great day. God bless. And I'll see you on the next one.
Have a great day.
I'm gonna start rambling. I don't even care.
All right.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Nice little chairs.
Yeah, I'm not gonna complain. This is a lap of luxury.
Yeah, I was going to do some other chairs, but I only have one. And we had the blue chair over there.
Yeah.
I had a couple of those. I had a black one and a pink one back to CRB, but I forgot to grab them, so I just grabbed these.
That works. Hey, as far as I'm concerned, once this video is over, I'm just gonna take a cat.
There you go. And I was like, I wish I could have left the fan on, but
Yeah, but I know how that goes
yeah,
with the
good luck with the
audio.
audio. So.